Okay, this is part 40 of Nos4a2, and I came home for Thanksgiving, and so the background's different. I'm sitting on a pile of pillows, there's a lot going on, so I apologize if the camera is very wonky, because I'm sure it is, but I wanted to get this out to you. So, Denver, Colorado. The first Saturday in October 2009, Lou told Victoria McQueen she was taking the kid and going to his mother's for a while. For some reason, he told her this in a whisper with the door shut, so Wayne, out in the living room, couldn't hear them talking. Lou's round face shone with nervous sweat. He licked his lips a lot while he spoke. They were in the bedroom together. Lou sat on the edge of the bed, causing the mattress to creak and sag halfway to the floor. It was hard for Vic to get comfortable in the bedroom. She kept looking at the phone on the night table, waiting for it to ring. She had tried to get rid of it a few days ago, had unplugged it and shoved it into a bottom drawer, but at some point Lou had discovered it there and plugged it back in. Lou said some other stuff about how worried he was, about how everyone was worried. She didn't catch all of it. Her whole mind was bent toward the phone, watching it, waiting for it to ring. She knew it would. Waiting for it was awful. It angered her that Lou had brought her inside, that they couldn't have done this conversation out on the deck. It shook her faith in him. It was impossible to have a conversation in a room with a phone. It was like having a conversation in a room with a bat hanging from the ceiling. Even if the bat was asleep, how were you supposed to think about anything else or look at anything else? If the phone rang, she would yank it out of the wall and get it out to the deck and throw it over the side. She was tempted not to wait, to just do it now. She was surprised when Lou said maybe she should go see her mother too. Vic's mother was all the way hell and gone back in Massachusetts, and Lou knew they didn't get on. The only thing that would have been more ridiculous was suggesting that Vic go see her father, whom she had not spoken to in years. I'd rather go to jail than stay with my mom. Jesus, Lou. Do you know how many phones my mother has in her house? Vic asked. Lou gave her a look that was somehow both distraught and weary. It was a look, Vic thought, of surrender. If you want to talk about anything, I've got my cell on me, Lou said. Vic just laughed at that. Didn't bother to tell him she had pulled his cell phone apart and shoved it in the garbage the day before. He took her in his arms, held her in his bearish embrace. He was a big man, glum about being overweight, but he smelled better than any guy she had ever met. His chest smelled of cedar and motor oil and the outdoors. He smelled like responsibility. For a moment, being held by him, she remembered what it had been like to be happy. Got to go, he said at last. Got a lot of driving to do. Go where? She asked, startled. He blinked, then said, Vic, dude, were you listening? Closely, Vic said, and it was true. She had been listening, just not to him. She had been listening for the phone. She had been waiting for it to ring. After Lewis and the kid were gone, she walked through the rooms of the brick townhouse on Garfield Street that she had paid for with the money she had made drawing search engine, back when she still drew, back before the children in Christmas Land started calling again every day. She brought a pair of scissors with her and she cut the lines leading into each of the phones. Vic collected the phones and brought them to the kitchen. She put them in the oven on the top rack and turned the dial to boil. Hey, it had worked the last time she needed to fight Charlie Mannix, hadn't it? As the oven began to warm, she shoved open the windows, switched on the fan. After that, Vic sat in the living room and watched TV in her panties and nothing else. First, she watched headline news. But there were too many ringer phones in the CNN studio and the sound unnerved her. She switched over to SpongeBob. When the phone in the Krusty Krab rang, she changed the channel again. She found a sports fishing program. That seemed safe enough, no phones in this kind of show, and the setting was Lake Winnipesaukee, where she had spent her childhood summers. She had She had always liked the way the lake looked just after dawn, a smooth black mirror wrapped in the white silk of early morning fog. At first, she drank whiskey on the rocks. Then, she had to drink it straight because it smelled too bad in the kitchen to go in there and get ice. The whole townhouse stank of burning plastic despite the fan and the open windows. Vic McQueen was watching one of the fishermen struggle with a trout when a phone began to chirp, somewhere near her feet. She looked down at the scattered toys on the floor, a collection of Wayne's robots, an R2-D2 a Dalek, and of course a couple of search engine figures. One of the robots, a transformer thing, black with a bulky torso and a red lens for a head. It visibly shivered as it chirped once more. She picked it up and began to fold the arms and legs inward. She pushed the head down into the body. She snapped the two halves of its torso together and suddenly was looking at a plastic non-functional toy cell phone. The plastic non-functional toy cell phone rang again. She pressed the answer button and held it to her ear. "You're a big fat liar," said Millicent Mannix. "And Daddy is going to be mad at you when he gets out. He's going to stick a fork in your eyes and pop them out just like corks." Vic carried the toy into the kitchen and opened the oven. Poisonous black smoke gushed out. The cooked bones had charred like marshmallows dropped in a campfire. She threw the transformer in on top of the melted brown slag and slammed the oven shut again. The stink was so bad she had to leave the house. She put on Lou's motorcycle jacket and her boots and got her purse and went out. She grabbed the whiskey bottle and pulled the door shut behind her, just as she heard the smoke detector begin to blat. She was down the street and around the corner when she realized she hadn't put anything on besides the jacket and her boots. She was tramping around Greater Denver at 2 a.m. in her faded pink panties. At least she had remembered the whiskey. She had meant to go home and pull on a pair of jeans, but she got lost trying to find her way back, something that never happened before, and wound up walking on a pretty street of 3-story brick buildings. The night was aromantic with the smell of autumn and the steely fragrance of freshly dampened blacktop. How she loved the smell of road, asphalt baking and soft in high July dirt roads with their dust and pollen perfume in June, country lanes spicy with the odor of crushed leaves in sober October, the land and salt smell of the highway, so like an estuary in February. At that time of the night, she had the street almost to herself, although at one point 3 men on Harleys rolled by. They slowed as they went past to check her out. Sorry. They weren't bikers, though. They were yuppies, who were probably creeping home to wifey after a boys' night out at an upscale strip club. She knew from their Italian leather jackets and Gap blue jeans and showroom quality bikes that they were more used to pizzeria unos than to living brutal on the road. Still, they took their time looking her over. She raised her bottle of whiskey to them and Wolf whistled with her free hand. And they grabbed their throttles and took off, tailpipes between their legs. I'm sorry. Oh my god, okay. She wound up at a bookstore, closed of course. It was a little indie with a big display of her books in one window. She had given a talk here a year ago. She had been wearing pants then. She squinted into the darkened store, leaning close to see which of her books they were peddling. Book 4. The 4th book was out already? It seemed to Vic she was still working on it. She overbalanced and ended up with her face smushed to the glass and her ass sticking out. She was glad book 4 was out. Oh my god. Okay. There had been moments when she didn't think she would finish it. When Vic had started drawing the books, the phone never rang with calls from Christmas land. That was why she had started Search Engine in the first place, because when she was drawing, the phones were silent. But then, midway through the 3rd book, radio stations she liked started playing Christmas songs in the middle of the summer and the calls began again. She had tried to make a productive moat around herself, a moat filled with Maker's Mark, but the only thing... Oh god. Okay. But the only thing she had drowned in it was the work itself. Vic was about to push away from the window when the phone in the bookstore rang. She could see it lighting up over at the desk on the far side of the shop. In the gusty and warm silence of the night, she could hear it quite clearly, and she knew it was them. Millie Mannix and Brad McNulty and Mannix's other children. "I'm sorry," she said to the store. "I'm not available to take your call. If you'd like to leave a message, you're shit out of luck." She shoved away from the window a little too hard and reeled across the sidewalk. Then the sidewalk ended and her foot plunged over the edge of the curb and she fell, sat down hard on her ass on the wet blacktop. It hurt, but not as much as it probably should have. She wasn't sure if the whiskey had muted the pain or if she had been on the Lou Comedy diet for too long and was now carrying a bit of extra padding back there. She worried she had dropped the bottle and broken it, but no. It was right there in her hand, safe and sound. She took a swallow. It tasted of the oak cask and sweet annihilation. She struggled back to her feet and another phone rang in another shop, a darkened coffee house. The phone in the bookstore was still ringing too. Then another went off, somewhere on the second floor of a building over to her right, and a fourth and a fifth, and the apartments above her, both sides of the street, up and down the lane. The night filled The night filled with a choir of phones. It was like frogs in the spring, an alien harmony of croaks and chirrups and whistles. It was like bells ringing on Christmas morning. "Go the fuck away," she screamed, and threw the bottle at her own reflection in a store window across the street. The plate glass exploded. All the phones stopped ringing at the same time, revelers shocked into quiet by a gunshot. A half-beat later, a security alarm went off inside the store, an electronic wang-dang doodle and a flashing silver light. The silver light silhouetted the wares on display in the window, bicycles. The night caught and held in place for one lush, gentle moment. The bicycle in the window was, of course, a Raleigh, white and simple. Vic swayed. The sensation of being threatened shut itself off as quickly as if someone had flipped a switch. She crossed the road to the bike shop, and by the time she was crunching across the broken glass, she had her plan worked out. She would She would steal the bicycle and ride it out of town. She would ride it out to Dakota Ridge into the pines in the night, would ride until she found the shorter way. The shorter way bridge would take her right over the walls of the Supermax prison and on into the hospital ward that held Charlie Mannix. That would be a hell of a sight, a 31-year-old in her underwear gliding along on a 10-speed through the long-term care ward of a maximum security lockup at 2 a.m. She pictured herself sailing through the dark between convicts sleeping in their beds. She'd ride right up to Mannix, put the kickstand down, yank the pillow out from under his head, and suffocate the filthy man-burner. That would end the calls from Christmasland forever. She knew it would. Vic reached through the broken glass and picked the Raleigh up and carried it out to the road. She heard the first distant wail of a siren, a yearning, agonized sound that carried a long way in the warm, damp night. She was surprised. The alarm had only gone off half a minute ago. She didn't think the cops would respond so quickly. But the siren she heard wasn't cops. It was a fire truck heading toward her townhouse, although by the time it arrived, there was not much left to save. The cop cars showed up a few minutes later.